Welcome to Daily Wisdom, a 31-day journey through the biblical book of Proverbs. I'm Brooke, and I'll be your guide for today's teaching through Proverbs 15. Well, I am so excited to be on this journey with y'all, and whether you've been following along with us through this whole month or this is your first time tuning in, I just want to say that we are so glad you're here, and I want to take a second to encourage that while these video teachings are incredible and we have heard some amazing insight from all the people who have shared, there's truly nothing better and more beneficial to you than getting in the Word of God yourself, daily seeking Jesus and what His Word has to say. So the hope of this series is that while you're watching these videos, that you're also following along, reading a chapter of Proverbs every day and meditating on one specific verse. And the reason behind us encouraging this is because we believe that every day the best thing you could do is meditate on God's word and get it into your mind and into your heart, because from that flows all things. And as we've been walking through this whole series, we know so confidently that we are humans in desperate need of God's truth and God's wisdom for our lives. And the best way we find that is through His word that He has given us. And for that, I am truly so grateful that we get to have such open access to the words of God to guide us and lead us on this journey we are on in life. The book of Proverbs is written with the intention of showing us as followers of Jesus the ways of the wise. And so throughout this book, we see the authors constantly portraying two different paths, two different ways that we could take. And one of those is the way of the wicked who is not following the ways of God. And then in opposition to that is the way of the wise, the ways of the person truly following God. And so the author here is showing how the ways of the person who is got their eyes set on Jesus, who is truly following Him, the ways of that person is associated with the ways of a wise person. And this shows us how God's intentions are to help us make wise choices and wise decisions that honor God in everything we do. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." And God, because He knows us so well, He inspired this book with specific warnings and teachings against things He knew that we as humans would face and be challenged by. And so before we dive into the chapter, I want to encourage you to read this with an open mind towards yourself and really allow yourself to see where God may be wanting to bring some correction or some direction into your life. I think naturally when we read this, our temptation will be to read and think instantly of someone else we know that fits the description of these warnings. But instead, I believe God would rather have us see how we may be the ones in need of the warning. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into chapter 15. What I love about Proverbs, and specifically this chapter, is that Solomon makes it so easy for us to read very clearly which ways are of the wicked and which are of the wise. And as we read, you can clearly see how one characteristic is correlated with a wicked person and which characteristic is correlated with a wise one. So starting in verse 1, it says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouths of fools pour out folly. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit." I want to stop right there for a second and unfold what the writer is saying here. So throughout this chapter, there's a very evident theme that I believe Solomon is trying to get across to us, and that is the power of our tongue and the power of our words. In verse 1, we see how the author pits a gentle word against a harsh word, saying that a softer, more gentle response is what will calm down a situation and turn anger away. But if we choose instead to respond harshly with mean and hurtful words, all we will do is stir up more anger and make tempers rising. And I think all of us can relate to this if you've ever had siblings or ever had a disagreement with a parent or with a spouse or with a boss, that typically the way it goes is one person starts to raise their voice and then the other person feels like not only do they have to match that, but they also have to raise them some, right? So then the two people just start going back and forth thinking that the louder they are, the more likely they are to get their point across. And next thing you know, the conversation has been taken from just a level 2 disagreement over a borrowed outfit to a level 8 screaming match over who is the favorite kid in the house, right? I know I personally can relate to that, having a sister who was only a year younger than me. we were constantly finding ways to just stir up anger with each other by seeing who could bring the harsher words to the conversation. And in the end, it only left both of us feeling more hurt than we came in and more filled with regret for the things we had spoken of the other person. And even though both of us knew how much we regretted what we said, that some of those words couldn't be taken back. They couldn't be unsaid. And once someone hears those words, a lot of times that's what lives in their head forever. In verse 4, we see it says very clearly that gentle words are a tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. Whenever I read this, I was thinking back to something my dad used to tell me all the time when I was a kid, and an old proverb that I'm sure every one of you has either heard before or maybe even taught to your own kids. And it goes like this: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And what this is obviously trying to teach is that physical pain will always have the ability to harm us and hurt us, but that words, because they aren't exactly physical, they don't have the power to hurt us, right? Now, when I was a kid, this kind of made sense to me. Like, if I don't externally feel it, then it must not be able to bring me pain. And I'd love to say that I've discovered how true this is and that the words have held no power over my life. But I think as we get older, we really can see how false this statement is. And if we're honest, we know that words can actually be more harmful and painful to us than any physical harm we face. And we see how much power there actually is in the words that are said to us and in the words that we speak to others. I watched a good bit of videos on cyberbullying and bullying in schools growing up in the times that we're in. And one specific one came to mind when thinking about this. And it's a visual representation of the power of our words. It's a video of young teenagers at a school where one group of girls is picking on one girl and saying all kinds of hateful and degrading words. And instead of the words just being said and the girl moving on, the video kind of illustrates the true power behind our words. Every time a negative word is spoken to the girl, she's physically impacted. Like, she doesn't just hear it and move on. She's physically impacted. They call her ugly and she's being seen being slapped in the face. They say she should die and she's literally thrown into the lockers. They tell her she has no friends and she just falls over on the ground in pain. And I thought, man, what a great way to show the true power behind our words, that they're not just words, but they can truly impact us. Our words have the power to crush someone's spirit or to be a source of life to them. And so the question I have for you guys is, what impact do you want your words to have on others? And as we continue reading through this proverb, we continue to see this theme of the power in words, the ones we receive and the ones we speak. And this not only applies to encouragement or discouragement, but also applies when talking about facing correction, getting and giving advice, or facing discipline. Verse 7 says, "The lips of the wise spread knowledge, not so the hearts of fools. There is severe discipline for him who forsakes the way. Whoever hates reproof will die. Sheol and Abaddon lie open before the Lord. How much more the hearts of the children of man? A scoffer does not like to be reproved. He will not go to the wise. A glad heart makes a cheerful face, but by sorrow of heart the spirit is crushed. The heart of him who has understanding seeks knowledge, but the mouths of fools feed on folly." At the start of these verses, we see Solomon share about how the wise share good advice and knowledge that they possess, but fools won't have anything to give. The wise possess the ability to give advice to those around them and help lead people into the way of wisdom through their words. But this also shows how we not only can be the givers of this wisdom, but how we should listen to those who are wise, for they can show us the path we should take. This especially applies to when we've made a mistake or done something dumb. Accepting critique and listening to wisdom from others around us. This teaches us how wisdom requires learning from correction. Jumping to verse 10, we see how the wicked hate listening to the counsel of the wise and will not follow in their ways. They hate being corrected and shown the way they should go instead. But we, as people of wisdom, we should know better and should intentionally listen to the words of wise counsel. And we should be seeking this wisdom and knowledge that comes from God. Verse 11 teaches us of how much God knows the human heart. God knows what is inside of you, and God knows what you need to be able to live in wisdom. There's no hiding, there's no secret able to be kept from the Lord. So with that knowledge, we should know to be open to hearing the words of correction and being disciplined for our wrongdoing, knowing that it will produce righteousness and wisdom in us. We can be confident that when we seek knowledge and wisdom from God, that we will find it. So we should be people who dwell in the Word of God constantly, seeking the truth we find in His words. Another translation of verse 14 says that a wise person is hungry for knowledge while the fool feeds on trash. Wise people, we will be hungry to seek out the words of truth and the words of wisdom, while foolish people will only feed on trash that will not produce the wisdom of God. The rest of this passage continues with more insight into the power of words and wisdom. And verse 23 actually has an important thing to say that I think really touches on Solomon's desire to show the power of our words. Verse 23 says, "To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is." Another translation says it like this: "Everyone enjoys a fitting reply. It is wonderful to say the right thing at the right time." In this verse, we can see how Solomon is teaching us that so often we will be put in times where a friend or someone we come into contact with is in need of hearing encouragement or support or love. And I believe all of us can think of a time when you were having a rough day or going through a rough season, and God provided someone to cross paths with you that just happened to say the right thing at the right time, right? So often we are in need of hearing God's truth and hearing something that has the ability to turn our faith around and encourage us to keep moving forward, to keep pursuing God. And from this verse, we can relate so much to being the person who received that good word in due season. But I also believe Solomon is encouraging us to be the person who is able to give that word in truth. 1 Peter 3:15 says, "But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." Now, this passage is actually referring to defending your faith and being ready to defend what you believe in, but the principle is the same, that we as followers of Christ should be prepared at any time to share the good news of Jesus and the hope we find in Him. We should always be expectant for God to present an opportunity for us to share what God has done and be ready to encourage those who may need it. When I was studying this verse, there was a memory that I thought of instantly, and it's something honestly that I replay in my mind on almost all my worst days where I'm struggling mentally or doubting and questioning things about my calling. This past summer, I went to a wedding for some friends from college, and I ran into an old friend that I hadn't seen in probably over a year. And I guess because I hadn't seen so many of my friends in such a long time, there was a piece of me that went into it feeling kind of anxious and almost afraid to share about what God had led me, because I didn't know if any of my friends would be able to see all that God had done in my life and the ways He had provided for my path that I was on now. And as we were catching up, she kind of casually asked me what I was doing these days, and I got the opportunity to share about the amazing opportunity I have to do the residency here at Journey. And I got to share about me pursuing full-time ministry and shared about the calling God had placed on my life. And when she responded, she just genuinely, instantly affirmed me and responded with something very simple, something simple like, "Well, of course you are. That's what you were always meant to do. It's about time you're pursuing it." And I just remember that moment. And for me to hear that from a friend meant more to me than she probably ever intended it to. But this was truly me hearing a good word in due season. This was truly her saying the right thing at the right time. And it's something that has stuck with me ever since, and I believe will stick with me for forever. She had no idea before she said that how much I needed affirmation and how much I needed encouragement. She didn't know about the anxiety I was facing or the doubts I had. But in a moment where I needed it, God provided the exact words I needed to hear and used her to affirm what God was wanting to speak into my life. We don't always know what every person we come into contact with is going through or what they're thinking of or what they're struggling with. But we as people of God can be prepared at all times to share a good word from God that can lighten someone's burden or encourage them to keep moving. And that is the power we hold when we have Christ in us and choose to use our words for good. We as people know how much we are in need to hear truth in a moment of sorrow or in pain. And when we do hear those words, the power they hold are so much greater than we even knew we needed to hear. And I believe God is encouraging us to be people who see the power of our words and choose to use them to bring life to people. And if you are a person who knows Jesus and walks with him daily, I believe that God can use you and can use your words for good and to be a tree of life to those around you. Well, I'm hopeful that each of you is participating in the Daily Wisdom Challenge that Pastor John initiated at the beginning of this series. So don't forget to be tuning into these videos daily, following along, reading a chapter of Proverbs a day, and keep meditating on one verse a day. And don't forget, don't do this alone. Don't do this challenge alone. Share this with a friend and be a person today that uses your words for good. See you guys next time.
Thank you for joining us for Daily Wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe to Journey's YouTube channel and sign up for notifications for future messages. If what you heard today was helpful or encouraging, please share it with others. Join us again tomorrow for more Daily Wisdom.